Joe, how's it going? Good morning to you today. First of all, I'm super excited to talk to you about your course and for you to highlight the ins and outs of your business. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what your offer actually is.
My pleasure. Well, Oscar, thanks for having me. I'm always excited to talk about course creation because I have been a course creator for like the better over a decade now. I used to teach in the classroom. And then when I moved away from my alma mater where I taught, I decided to make online courses and I make courses for LinkedIn Learning and stuff like that. So I love this stuff. Today, as we record this, I have one offering. I actually emailed my list and I told them that I was shutting down creatorcourses.com, which is where all of my courses lived. So as we record this, I have one offering. I'm real excited about it. Um,
Hmm.
in May of 2022, I decided I was going to only focus on podcasting. That's
Hmm.
a break from all of my other courses, which are like programming and things like that. So I have the podcast Liftoff playbook. This is a video library that has a self-paced course kind of component to it, but it's really a one-time membership. So you pay
Hmm.
once, you get access to my library. It's almost like a Netflix or a master class where you can pick and choose and make your own stuff.
Oh, cool.
Um, and the playbook will teach people how to launch, grow, and monetize their podcast. And every other month, we have some sort of live component, whether it's like a cohort
Hmm.
or just like accountability meetings. So
Mm.
that's like those are the two of three aspects. And then the third aspect is the lab. That's the one I'm really excited about. And that's
Hmm.
just where I post things that I'm experimenting with on podcasting because people want to learn from me like how the best way to do podcasts.
Hmm.
And I want to be really transparent with my students. Like I'm trying this month. We're going to see how it works out. I'll tell you the results. So self-paced videos, a live component of some sort, and then the lab where I'm experimenting with new ways to launch, grow, and monetize podcasts.
Wow, it's incredible. And I mean, as a podcaster myself, I'm already intrigued by the offer, right? But before I go deeper into your offer, I kind of want to pump the brakes and backtrack a little bit because that was a big decision you did in May when you're like, I'm only going to focus on this, right? So talk to me a little bit about that. Let's dive deeper into the mythology behind that.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, you're a creator and an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
You probably feel the pull to try a bunch of things, right?
Hmm.
And whether it's that's just general curiosity or you have this great idea that you want to execute on, or you panic because you're not making as much money as you thought and you need to roll out yet another product. You get to a point where you're doing too many things. And I was at that point last year. I mean, I was at that point well before last year, but it really settled in. And so I stole this idea from Bill Gates of like the idea of like a think weekend,
Hmm.
where like he goes to like an island or whatever, but I went to like an Airbnb in my hometown. And it was just me away from I have three small kids at home. So it was just me in this tiny little house on a farm.
Hmm.
And I brought a portable whiteboard and I wrote out everything I did and then what I should be focusing on. And the big result of that think weekend was I need to only focus on podcasting because for the last almost 20 years,
Hmm.
I was a web developer and a WordPress developer, and I had multiple courses and books and live teachings and talks published about WordPress. And if I really want to do this pivot the right way,
Hmm.
I need to let all of that go and focus only on podcasting. And so my friends and people in my mastermind have been telling me I need to do that for years. And
Hmm.
in May, I finally bit the bullet and decided I'm going to do it.
Wow. What when you were whiteboarding all this out, right? And you see, okay, this is the stuff that I need to be focusing on. What was that mental shift that happened? Because you said that you had plenty of people telling you that this was going to happen, right? Or that you should be going in this direction. But for you, it just never clicked. So what was it about that weekend in that farm that made it click for you?
I think seeing laid out everything I was doing and everything I was trying to promote, because like,
Hmm.
and the fact that my certain course, so I'll just straight up say, I come from the WordPress space, and like
Hmm.
people in the WordPress space are cheap. I like that's like maybe a mean thing to say, but it's true. And there's a lot of like, why would I buy this when I could figure it out myself
Hmm.
mentality.
Hmm.
And so some of my courses did pretty well, but um constantly selling to a list that people were not interested in buying from. And then the other aspect was when you do a technical course, right? Maybe some people listening, do that,
Mhm.
things change rapidly and you need to keep it updated. And so, like, several of my courses I made and I sold, and they did pretty well initially, but they
Mhm.
weren't subscription based and the
Mhm.
sales dried up. And
Mm.
I felt like I had to keep them updated.
Mhm.
Nobody was asking, by the way.
Mhm.
Like, here's like number one rule of course creation. If nobody's asking for it, don't do it. But nobody was asking. But I felt like, oh man, this is like several versions behind now. I need to keep this updated. And so seeing it all laid out on that whiteboard made me realize these are things that are taking my time and making me
Mhm.
no money.
Mm.
And as a business owner with a family to support, I just can't do that anymore. And I
Mhm.
really feel like if you know if you follow like Wayne Gretzky's advice, like go where the like skate where the puck is going. I feel like the podcasting industry, where I already had a foothold in, is
Mhm.
going to blow up. And
Mhm.
so I need to start now to establish my authority and build an audience only in that of qualified leads who want to buy my course and my teachings.
Mhm. I think that was such an important distinction that you mentioned that I don't want people to glance over. Where you're talking about your customer, and you mentioned that in some cases your customer is very, I'll figure this out. And in that cases, that may not be an ideal customer if you're
Yeah.
trying to scale a business, right? Because they're going to look for a different way of doing it. And that kind of goes against the grain, which with many advice you find online, where it's like, people are always looking for an A to Z solution. But the thing is that, again, if you create that A to Z solution and you're not constantly updating it, and let's say you're in that kind of WordPress space where you have to constantly update it, people will go somewhere else, or they may not ever come back to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And like, I was it was a little bit of a misunderstanding with who I wanted my audience who maybe who I thought my audience was versus who I wanted them to be. And so, yeah, the DIY folks, like if you're an early adopter, like again, the courses that did the best for me
Hmm.
were courses where I hopped on a piece of software early,
Yeah.
made the course, got a bunch of freelancers who
Hmm.
wanted to learn this more effectively. And then
Hmm.
I would also say, like, oh, hey, you can license this course for your customers and include it
Oh,
as training for them if you want. But again, like, the early adopters are great, but the mentality in the WordPress space is eventually like, oh, everything should be free anyway.
mhm.
So again, it wasn't a sustainable business model for me.
Gotcha, gotcha. So now, kind of going back to your offer now, which it's called Podcast Liftoff, correct? Make
Yeah,
sure I got that correct.
Podcast Liftoff is the
Mhm.
brand, and the actual offering is the playbook, the Podcast
The
Liftoff
playbook,
playbook. Yeah.
got it. So that's kind of makes sense now as to why it's kind of more of like a membership, if you will, where you have the content, but then I'm assuming you're constantly updating with fresh material as these updates come out, right?
Yeah, and it's still a one-time fee
Hmm.
for now.
Hmm.
If I guess this is the other thing, right? Is
Hmm.
I've slowed my roll a little bit. Like I would
Yeah.
roll out these courses and think it's gonna make thousands of dollars just by virtue of existing. And that's never the case, right? And so with this, I said I'll build my list, I'll test the waters. My friend challenged me to 10x the number of podcast liftoff customers because I did have a standalone course just
Hmm.
called Podcast Liftoff, and then see what works and what doesn't work there. So I'm
Hmm.
taking a much slower approach. If the live events, or the cohorts are something that's popular, or
Hmm.
I do find myself adding new content like every week or every month, then it will switch to a subscription. But at this point, my current audience
Hmm.
probably wants to know a specific thing and
Yeah.
then get some access to me. And so
Gotcha.
that's a good one-time fee. There is a upsell like the extended playbook that gets
Hmm.
them a 1-hour coaching call with me. And then if later this year, I suspect, I find like, hey, this should be a subscription, then for new customers, it'll be subscription based, or it'll be like one time for this, subscription for this other stuff.
What's the big promise behind the playbook? What's the big promise that you're offering in terms of getting people into the course?
It'll so the tagline up until this point, and I like it hasn't changed as we record this, is you'll make your first $10,000 as a podcaster. I
Mm.
want to change that a little bit to
Mhm.
it'll make you a profitable podcaster. Because I
Mm.
think a lot of people who podcast are doing it and they're not making money either because they don't want to, like it's their hobby, or they
Yeah.
just don't know how to. And I think saying that you're going to be a profitable podcaster kind of implies like you're serious about it you're a business owner or a consultant or an author, and you want to
Mhm.
use your podcast to generate income for your business.
Now, earlier you mentioned that you feel like the podcast world is going to blow up. What indications do you have of that happening? Many people would say that it already came and gone, but what's that magic bean that's telling you it's going to blow up pretty soon?
Yeah, I think a lot more people are interested in launching. It's gotten a lot easier to
Hmm.
launch. And there's Edison Research every year has their statistics. They put them out, I think, in February or March, where they cover like year over year growth in podcasting. And it's been growing at a steady rate basically since like 2013, 2014, right? And like Lore and Serial came out and people
Hmm.
started learning what podcaster or
Hmm.
what podcasts are. In November, October maybe, they put out a creator study
Hmm.
and they learned that most people who are starting podcasts
Hmm.
have been listening to podcasts for less than a year. So we're seeing that trend, that little upswing. The technology is getting easier. Like this moment now reminds me of like blogging circa 2003, 2004,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden blogs blew up because like WordPress was out and movable type was out, and you
Hmm.
didn't need to have any technical knowledge to blog on a website
Hmm.
or to even set up a website. Today, with Descript's studio sound and
Yeah.
automatic transcripts and idea generation with AI, it is easier than ever to quickly and affordably set up a podcast. And I think more people are going to recognize that this
Hmm.
should be a part of my marketing strategy. And that's
Hmm.
where I want to position myself.
Mm. I love it. It almost makes too much sense.
I know, right? I'm like, this sounds too good to be true. Usually I'm
Yeah.
suspect of that.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that the most people that are starting podcasts have been listening to podcasts for less than a year. Like you mentioned, the barrier is so low, so many more people are coming in, but it's like how many of those will actually find success? How many of those will actually find their footing and be able to create something that's going to drive their marketing efforts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good question, right? And I would say this reminds me a bit of YouTube, right? On
Mhm.
YouTube, I mean, the last time I checked, it was like 31 million. It's probably a lot more than that now. But let's just use those stats. 31 million active YouTube channels, right?
Mhm.
And still today, people are like, you need to get into YouTube. You need to get into YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube is definitely a thing that if you are going to build your authority and build your audience, you need to be on.
Mhm.
There are, by some estimates, less than 2 million active podcasts where active means published a new episode in the last 90 days.
Wow.
So that's like a fraction,
Mhm.
1/15th of what's out there on YouTube. So
Mhm.
people who are like, "Oh, podcasting is already saturated." It is far from saturated. And YouTube is getting into like the fact that like
Yeah.
YouTube is throwing their hat into the ring means that YouTube sees the value of podcasting. And that's another reason
Mhm.
why I think more people are going to get into it, right? Is because now YouTube is throwing their monetization weight
Mhm.
behind podcasting, rolling out audio only ads for, I
Mhm.
mean, what could that possibly be for? Right? It's
Yeah.
not going to be for
Yeah.
videos. They're not just going to show a blank screen with a logo for an audio
Yeah.
only ad. Google knows what podcasts are. So
Mhm.
YouTube is going to know what podcasts are, like proper
Mhm.
podcasts. And so we're going to see that evolve over the next couple of years.
Mhm.
And they already have a strategy to make money themselves and then give that ability to podcasters via YouTube.
Mm. So there's definitely a huge opportunity. And I know listeners right now are probably asking, okay, like, should I start a podcast? Do I want to start a podcast? Like what? Like there's so many questions in terms of like the production, the effort, right? So in your mind, what is the best return on effort when it comes to podcasting that you could give to owners or course creators?
This is such a phenomenal question because I think that when most people hear podcasting still, they think, well, it has to be an interview. We have to talk about tech, or it has to be like a true crime or fiction podcast. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be, right? I think the
Mhm.
best format for people who want to start a podcast today is the mini podcast. It's just you
Mm.
and a microphone talking for 20 minutes or less about something in your area of expertise. Because podcasts are a great way to get people to know, like, and trust you.
Mhm.
And so if you're thinking, how can I do a podcast today? I'll give you the quick, like, 3 to 4 step rundown. Number one, define your mission statement. Who does your podcast serve? What problem does it solve? Because painkillers sell or are shared more easily than vitamins. So if you're solving a problem, it's true, right? If you're solving a problem, then people are more likely to listen and share. So first figure out who you serve.
Hmm.
Then come up with 20 to 25 topics. If your podcast is in your area of expertise, you probably already have this. You have blog
Hmm.
posts, you have newsletters, you have a bunch of ideas rattling around in your head.
Hmm.
Then make a couple of outlines for 2 or 3 tests
Hmm.
and record those episodes. If you are comfortable doing that, then record 10 more, schedule them weekly. Now you have like 3 months of content, and now it's just a case of uploading it. I say just, right? It's still work,
Hmm.
but it's not research guests, find guests, get them on, make sure they don't sound like garbage, right? Like Oscar, what you're doing here is like high risk, right? Like I could have a crappy internet connection. I could be
Yeah.
using the built-in microphone for my monitor, which is going to sound
Right.
like trash. I could have screaming children in the background, and
Hmm.
that's nothing to say of video. But like you've been doing this for 3 to 4 years.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
daunting for someone who's just starting. But if I'm telling you, just talking to your microphone for 15 minutes about something that you already know really well, you
Hmm.
could do 3 or 4 of those in an hour and a half, and now you have a month's worth of content.
100%, and I'll be a testament to that because when this show first started, if you guys want to go back to episode 1, it sounds like I'm underwater, and that's because I was recording on my phone,
Yeah.
and I was in my closet in my apartment because that was the best audio. And yeah, I agree that it's consistent, and I think out of the tips that you recommended, what's easier now, you alluded to this earlier with AI, it's like with ChatGPT, you can even ask it, hey, when it comes to this specific market, give me 10 different topics, and it will list them out for you that are super relevant that you could expand on with your own expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this episode is coming out by, like, Friday, probably not, but my next live stream is going to be exactly about that. Like, how can
Yeah.
I integrate ChatGPT or other AI into
Mhm.
my workflow? How can this help podcasters? Because one of the biggest questions I get is, like, how do you come up with ideas when the well runs dry?
Yeah.
And I am like a fountain of ideas. Like
Mhm.
I find ideas everywhere, but that's like a learned skill.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so if you have something like ChatGPT that is just putting, and it learns from a bunch of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
these are ideas that people have probably already covered, right? It's not just inventing them out of nowhere.
Mhm.
But just like with blogs, right? Like I think we've gotten over the I can't write a blog post about this because somebody else wrote a blog post about that, right?
Right.
I can't do a podcast episode about this because there's already one about, but it's not you talking about it. It's not
Mhm.
you and your experience and your point of view.
Mhm.
And so Chat GPT can definitely show you like, hey, these are things that people talk about on the internet. Throw your hat into the ring and tell us how you feel about it and your
Mhm.
experience with it.
I love how you mentioned how you feel and your experience, because I think, and I'm not sure if you teach it this way within your course, but I think it's an important way for someone to distinguish themselves from others is by talking about their experience and their feelings and using their story to leverage and to create something unique and different.
Yeah. And this is why every recipe blog has like 1,000 words before the actual recipe, right? Because making chocolate chip cookies, like you're always going to use like eggs and flour and chocolate chips or
Yeah.
whatever. But like the first time that you ate a chocolate chip cookie, like maybe that reminds you of your grandmother who passed away last year, right?
Mhm.
And that forms the human connection, right? Sorry, my New
Mhm.
York accent just that forms the
No, you're good.
human connection. And that is what makes your content stand out because maybe somebody reading that goes, "My grandmother used to make the best chocolate chip cookies and she passed away last year too." And now
Mhm.
I feel something reading this and I feel a
Yeah.
connection to the creator.
Powerful. Let's talk about your course structure, the different modules in that course. 'Cause it's really intriguing, like how you are going to help someone become profitable. And since we're talking about stories and using that to connect, is that part of your curriculum? And where is that exactly within the curriculum?
The way that the playbook is structured, right,
Hmm.
is I learned a while ago that there are the people who are going to take it
Yeah.
from module 1 to module whatever,
Yeah.
25 in a row
Hmm.
and just take the whole course. Most people, including these people probably after they take the whole course,
Hmm.
are looking for something specific that they want to solve a problem right now. And so I noticed that people weren't completing my courses. They were looking for specific whatevers, specific modules on how to find your first sponsor or how to set up a membership site. And so with the playbook, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of the LMS completely.
Mm,
And I'm going to create these videos. I'm using WordPress. And so every video is in a category and subcategory. And so you could still take the each video in the order that I've defined it, almost like a playlist.
yeah.
But I also made sure to include a very robust search feature
Hmm.
where you can just search automation or sponsors and all the videos will come up there. So I call I call the
Oh,
courses collections now. It's a collection of
yeah.
videos and you could take them in order or you can just search for the one video you're looking for and like not get bothered that hey, you've only taken like half of the videos in this course. Are you going
Okay,
to take the rest?
time out. This makes too much sense. So, because again, and no, that's probably my bad, right? Because most people assume that a course follows like a modular structure, but in your case, you're kind of creating like a quick like Swiss Army knife when it comes to, hey, look, you're a podcaster, you're trying to be profitable. What is it that you need to do? Okay, you need to create an intro. Boom, type an intro. Here's the videos on intro. You need to figure out how to get a sponsor. Boom, here it is. So it's kind of like, what is your need, and let's get you the solution, right? So it's pretty cool how you are kind of like diagnosing what the problem is and then immediately providing that prescription right then and there, so it creates, I'm assuming, would be a huge amount of value for the people that are going through it.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? And then
Hmm.
the beauty of this is as I add more videos, I don't have to think, how does this fit into this specific course? I'll just
Mm.
throw it in the resources or bonus section, right? That's what I would used to do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Bonus, something that maybe fits somewhere, right? But also, if I want to create a new course, right? Let's say I want to create a launch your mini podcast course.
yeah.
A lot of it's going to look the same, right? How to come up with content ideas, how to upload your audio to your audio host. And maybe there's just like a new intro telling you what a mini podcast is. Now I don't have to spin up a new course, copy
Yeah.
those modules over it because most LMSs don't let you share lessons or modules between courses. So I have
Wow.
to copy those modules. I don't have to do that with this structure. I can just create a new category called Launch Your Mini Podcast
Yeah.
and then add the videos I want in the order I want to that new category.
Dude, I am now questioning reality. That is such a smart way of doing it.
Yep. And I'll say
That
like
is
I'll
super
say the
cool.
drawbacks, right? Is I don't have
Yeah.
reporting, right? There's no certificate of completion,
Yeah.
but I think the benefits outweigh the pros outweigh the cons. I don't know what the other word for like opposite of benefits is, or I can't think of it right now. And masterclass, I love the masterclass.com. They've taken a similar approach, right? Yes, they have these self-paced courses,
Yeah.
but they've been promoting these collections where it's
Mhm.
like, hey, do you need videos on leadership? Well, here's Bob Iger talking about it.
Yeah.
Here's Daniel Pink talking about it. Here's Chris Voss talking about his negotiation tactics that he gives to leaders. And so I really love that model, and this gives me more flexibility.
Yeah, not only that, but it's also kind of like the use of time, because how much time is spent on recreating things that you've already created in the past, and it's kind of like you mentioned, creating a little course on mini podcasts rather than having to start from, okay, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. It's like, forget it. Let's just get right to the meat and potatoes of it and give people what they want, which is the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is I think this is medicine for another ailment for a lot of course creators, which is
Hmm.
I have an idea for a course. I'm going to create an outline. It's going to be a 6-hour course. I'm going to record it all and edit it all and then release it. And it's going to take me 4 months and then no one's going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas with this method, I can kind of test out new material
Hmm.
more easily and then add it to the playbook. And then if I'm like, wow, because I use Vimeo for my videos. And so I can still see like how many people are watching these videos. If I'm
Hmm.
like, dang, 90% of the playbook watched this video that I recorded like real quick in an afternoon,
Hmm.
maybe I should formalize this a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Or if people are asking like, "Hey, you did this video on podcast swaps, but like how do I find the email addresses of podcasters?"
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Now I know I can make this, right? So it allows me to have a faster iterative process as well as a
Mhm.
better feedback loop.
Yeah, and for me, like I believe speed is king when it comes to business and just getting things out, and also just marketing. And the fact that this this process gives someone so much freedom in terms of It doesn't need to be perfect. You just got to put out there, see what happens. Because, like you said, you don't want to create a course and 4 months later, no one buys it. It's just
Right.
crickets, right?
Yeah.
And then the other idea that most people have when it comes to creating courses is like do the beta first, right? Do like a drip kind of thing where you have certain members and you release it on a week by week basis. That also kind of goes out the window with this method because again, now you're just creating like you're almost creating, like you mentioned earlier, a Netflix, but it's more so like a your own search engine for the relevant content that your market really desires.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is because I have all of I made all those mistakes, right?
Hmm.
I made a course just on how to build a podcast website, and the very first question I got from the very first person who bought my course was, "Yeah, but how do I launch a podcast?" I'm like, "Okay, great. Now I need that part." And so I
Yeah.
made all those mistakes. So I have a library of content. If you're starting out, I recommend, right? Like, the way that most people do it, like do the webinar to test the idea,
Hmm.
pre-sell the course, and
Hmm.
then do the beta, right? But if you're like me and you have all this content and you're like, what do I do with this? Like, no one's
Yeah.
buying it. Maybe I should make a new course. Don't make a new thing.
Hmm.
Market the old thing better. And that's what I decided to do with the playbook. And it's working out for me so far.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about, well, if you don't mind sharing, what price point is this at right now?
Yeah, as we record this today, it is at $2.99 for the playbook and $5.99 for the extended playbook, which gives you access to like office hours and a coaching call with me. But that's how much it's priced at right now. And I kind of did that way as like a guess, right? Pricing is so hard, but
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
original course was sold at like $199, and I thought, well, there's more of me in this course.
Hmm.
There's a lot more content in this course. Webinar replays, right? This is another thing I do because I do about a monthly webinar
Okay.
on podcasting. Replays are only available for 48 hours and then they get added to the playbook. And so like that's a high value thing. And so I thought I'll start it at $2.99. And again, if these live events like start to do better, I'll probably either increase the one-time price or turn that into a annual subscription.
Mm. How many people would you say go from the 299 and actually take you up on the 599 offer?
Yeah, so far it's been about 10%, which is not bad. And
For an
again, this is
upsell, that's pretty good.
yeah, and this is really new, right? It's really new. I think I did a pretty poor job of like marketing my old courses and capturing like the excitement
Mhm.
of when people first sign up. I'm doing a lot better job of that now. So I'm certain that there are people who bought Podcast Liftoff. I brought them over to the playbook, right? Because
Mhm.
they paid a one-time fee, and I wanted to seed the community, the almost community a little bit, but I also
Yeah.
wanted to do right by those folks. And so think as I start to sell more
Mhm.
and I get my like webinar to sales flywheel going a
Mhm.
little bit better, I think that will increase because the people who I have been coaching are finding a lot of value in the things that I tell them.
Mm.
Not to toot my
Absolutely.
own horn, but that's what people are telling me.
Well, I mean, that's generally what happens in like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're an expert in your field, right? You've been doing this for some time, but it's kind of like people always value that one-to-one access, right? Where they can get, kind of much like what you did with I want to call it a course, but it's not really a course. It's like again, like a search engine, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's but it's like I can find out exactly what I want for my podcast, or I can go straight to the source and get the answer from them. And that to me is way more valuable. So it justifies the price point. And just from my own personal experiences, 10% on an upsell take rate is actually pretty good to start off at from, I'm assuming is a warm audience. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right about I think a lot of, especially course creators or like knowledge
Mhm.
information sellers, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think that they worry that they're going to give away too much of their information for free.
100%. Yeah.
But the way I think of it, right, is the free content, I'll give away all of my content over time, right? Like it's just eventually I'll run out of something to talk about and I'll pull from a video on the playbook and I'll just talk
Mhm.
about it on LinkedIn. The free content is general advice. The paid content is the specific advice for you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's where we make our money. And so like people who are buying the playbook, yes, they're buying to get the videos and get them in the right order, right? And not just like a random Facebook post or a random LinkedIn post that I close the loop on like 6 months later, right? They're buying the
Yeah.
expediency of having all of that now.
Hmm.
but they're also buying direct access to an inbox, right? This is another part of the extended playbook is they get
Hmm.
access to an inbox only for them where I respond within, I say within 72 hours. It's like really within 24 business hours.
Okay.
So like they're getting that expedited access to me.
Mm.
And that's like, hey, I launched and like nobody's listening. Like, what can I do to get downloads faster? All right, well, you can do these three things, right?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes sense. A lot of sense. Okay. So you mentioned that you're working on your webinar funnel, but is there a current structure in terms of how you're getting traffic or how you're attracting that traffic at the moment?
This is the thing I struggle with the most, I
Hmm.
think, and I always have. I think it's just always, again, I was unfocused and I was
Hmm.
doing things, too many things at
Yeah.
the same time, and people didn't know what they could follow me for. And so the things I'm doing now to build my audience, I think it's like we'll say a three-pronged approach because like three is like that magic number. Posting on LinkedIn, honestly, Twitter has done very little for me, especially with recent changes, like where you have to be like Twitter Blue to like get more eyeballs on your. I mean,
Yeah.
people who are watching the video can see that my mic is verified. I'm not verified though. I'm not paying $8 for a blue check mark. I paid $8 for these stickers, and that's fine. And so, but posting on LinkedIn, I'll tell you, I made a post last week and it gained me about 30 new followers,
Mm.
which is a lot. I like that's a lot at one time for me at least. And I got really good engagement. And so LinkedIn has been doing well for me. I've been getting people in my DMs there saying like, "Hey, your stuff is super helpful. Can I pick your brain a bit?" Or, "I'd love to get a coaching call with you," or "I'd love to do the playbook."
Mhm.
And now there are people who only know me from podcasting, which was like seemed like an insurmountable goal last May.
Mhm.
Like I was so entrenched in WordPress.
Mhm.
And then somebody was like, "I love your podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, how I built it, like, WordPress, whatever." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "I'm talking about your profitable podcaster podcast." I'm like, "What?" It was like super rewarding. LinkedIn is really
Yeah.
working for me there. The other thing I'm doing is Upscribe, which is from Sparkloop.
Mhm.
Sparkloop is a service. They integrate very tightly with ConvertKit.
Okay.
And so Upscribe is a relatively new feature where you can list a couple of recommended newsletters when people sign up for yours, very similar to how Substack works.
Mhm. Mhm.
And a few people have added my profitable podcaster newsletter to
Oh,
their
cool.
recommendations, and I've been getting subscribers that way, which is cool. And then the third way is going on other people's podcasts.
What? No way.
Yeah. So I tell my students this if they want to grow their podcasts. I'm using
Mhm.
it to grow my newsletter. So if you stick around till the end, you'll hear
Mhm.
about a custom landing page that I made
Whoa.
just for listeners of this show. And the freebie will be relevant to what we talked about on the show.
Mhm.
And then it gets them onto my mailing list. And that's also been really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a step back and look at LinkedIn because I think LinkedIn is kind of like how you feel about podcasting. I think LinkedIn's about to blow up in
Yeah.
terms of how effective it is when it comes to specifically B2B marketing. But when it comes to LinkedIn, like are you posting articles? Do you have a LinkedIn newsletter? Are you just making posts? Like what's your strategy with LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm still pretty much in the experimentation phase here. For a while, I was just taking my Twitter threads and putting them on LinkedIn. I was using a service from Taplio where
Hmm.
you could take a Twitter thread and turn it into a carousel. And then I decided at the beginning of 2023 that I was going to do a LinkedIn first approach.
Hmm.
And so it's still like I'm still doing carousels, but I'm not using like my Twitter threads. I am writing things. Actually, this is a very, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Um, because I also love automation. Like one of the
Hmm.
reasons I'm a profitable podcaster is because I automate so much stuff. But the crux of it is I created a LinkedIn carousel template in Canva. And so I'll write everything out in a Google Doc and then I'll move that into the Canva template and I'll
Hmm.
post that. But the automation part of it is that I have a folder called LinkedIn posts on
Hmm.
Google Drive. I'll create a new Google Doc called whatever, right? 5 places to find podcasts to do podcast swaps. When I do that, I'm using Make, formerly Integromat. That will create a new entry in Airtable for a LinkedIn post, and then it'll grab the date of the last post and add 2 days to it. So I try to post like every other day. And then I create the Google Doc, and my VA
Hmm.
grabs the text from the Google Doc. I highlight like the text that I actually want her to post in red and then
Mhm.
the rest is the carousel. So she makes the carousel and then posts it on the day in Airtable. And so, I mean, that's like the clever.
That no, that is super cool because it's kind of like, people who are listening to this are kind of like, what is going on here? But it's a systematic approach, right, to creating and posting content on LinkedIn, right? So it's pretty clever, man. I like the way you set it up and the step by steps, and I think I want more people listening to take that approach because I do the same thing with like Instagram Reels, right? Like Instagram Reels and TikTok Reels and YouTube Shorts, it's all the same video, but it's like I've automated the process behind the screen to just stream flow that entire content creation process so that I'm not spending hours, days, weeks figuring out what to create or how to create that content.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, like, I'm part of like a morning co-working group where we get together every morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, and just for a half hour we work on something, and I use that time to make a back catalog of LinkedIn posts, and then like
Mhm.
we're in a group together where we post our LinkedIn posts
Mhm.
and then we comment and like or whatever, right? Because like I guess LinkedIn really values comments. And so, that has been an effective strategy to like find a group of people where you can have like a LinkedIn buddy. But as far as the system goes, right? It's I've got 3 small children at home. And so if I want any sort of consistency, I need to have a system in place. And so I like the writing part, but like I don't need to do any of the other parts. And so my VA has been super valuable for that. And then I actually go in and comment and engage, obviously. But like if I need to post every morning at 9 a.m. and like there's a 2 hour delay because it snowed, like I'm not posting at 9 a.m. Right. So and I know that there's like services that can do that for you, but
Mhm.
my VA is super valuable. She's really great. I know that she's gonna do it the right way every time, and so that has been and it's fun to experiment with automation as well.
Yeah, yeah. Not only that, but it's kind of like, using schedulers, although they won't say this, you won't find an article that says this, but through my own research, I feel like if you use a third party scheduler to post the content as opposed to just uploading it directly, you do see some penalization happening there, either in terms of impressions or reach. Again, this is just, my experimentation out there in the field, but I'm with the same mindset of like it's better to just natively upload this content if you have the ability to do so.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree wholeheartedly. And so to close the loop on this, what I'll do is
Mhm.
I'll try to do 2 carousels a week and then 2 short form like questions
Mhm.
or things like just text every week. And so like today it's like a happy Monday, it's AMA day, ask me anything about podcasting. And or like I ask people for like people love giving their recommendations. So like I
Mhm.
ask for like what's the best podcast you listen to in 2022. So stuff like that. That way I'm not like writing an essay a day, right, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, because that is
Tricky.
also a lot of work. And the final like secret sauce here is like I take those and then I turn them into my newsletter. I turn them into episodes of my mini podcast, but having it in a Google Doc is the format. And then like, I do take it and I post it on Twitter, but I don't expect anything from Twitter anymore. It has been very rewarding for me.
Nice. Do you repurpose those carousels over on Instagram by any chance, or
I
not really?
don't, and I've thought about it. I've thought about it, but I haven't curated the type of audience. Like if you go to Twitter or LinkedIn, right? I'm a podcast coach and I talk mostly about podcasting. On Twitter, I'll
Mhm.
also talk about the Yankees.
Yeah.
Like I try to use a hashtag so you can mute that hashtag. But on LinkedIn, if you go over there, it's like my kids and cigars. And I should say like
Nice.
my kids, comma, and cigar. It's not my children with cigars.
I wouldn't hold it back.
And so I've really s- kind of kept Instagram a little bit more personal.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So, and any paid traffic at all, or just strictly organic at the moment?
Strictly organic at the
Okay.
moment. I think a mistake that people make with paid traffic is I've made this mistake as well. So maybe I'm just projecting on everybody, but it's like it's you do need to have a strategy, you need to have the right budget, and you need
Mhm.
to know your outcome, right? So like I would post like a webinar I was doing in Facebook ads, but I didn't
Mhm.
really know my audience and I wouldn't do it like I'd be like, yeah, $10 a day for 5 days the week before the webinar, great. Um, and, like, I didn't have the right copy or whatever that would attract
Right.
so, like, if you're gonna do that, like, there needs to be, like this is why there are industries based on that,
Mhm.
right? I just never did it right, and so if I'm gonna do it again, I wanna make sure I'm gonna do it right, but the organic has been working pretty well for me. I mean, we'll see. I have a webinar in a week and a half. The first one did really well. This is a new topic, but we'll see. We'll see how well this one does to I try to recalibrate after every one and
Yeah.
experiment, like little experiments, you know?
No, it's pretty cool because, like, I mean, I'm a paid ads guy. Like, I'm paid traffic all the way, but it's really cool hearing the other perspective as far as like organic traffic and the fact that LinkedIn is really working well for you in terms of building that audience and curating that audience. Because I think for me, at the end of the day, whether you go paid or organic, the key is to focus on building an audience.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
got to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, that's like I said, like I'm fully aware that anytime I tried paid traffic and it didn't work, it was like it was me. I
Mhm.
didn't do it right. It's not something that you could just like decide to do one day and then just like do it really quick. This is
Yeah,
not a
no, it
it's not a
takes
do it
time,
real
it
quick
takes
thing.
trial and
Yeah.
error, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
the first time I tried, it was about 6 months of, credit card debt accumulation, so it was a lot of good times.
Wow.
But you ended up figuring it out. Now, what's really cool about your business is that, like, you mentioned you kind of gave up your LMS. So, let's take a second and just talk about the tech that you use to kind of run all this, because I know you mentioned WordPress, and I know you have a lot of different automation processes in the background kind of going on, but as far as, like, your main tech stack, what does that actually look like to run the business?
Yeah, great question. So, if we talk specifically about let's talk about the membership site first. I really wanted to streamline this process, right? So I
Mhm,
was using LearnDash. Full disclosure, LearnDash sponsors my podcast. I really love LearnDash, but again, I wanted to eliminate the LMS part. I knew that this site would become more of a membership site.
mhm.
So I set up a completely new site separate from the marketing site over at playbook.podcastliftoff.com. And that uses Paid Memberships Pro. Full disclosure, Paid Memberships Pro is a sponsor of my podcast. I here's a free tip for you on if you have a podcast and you're looking for sponsors. Go to people you use and know and talk to because you can speak most genuinely about those. So like
Oh,
I used LearnDash before they sponsored my podcast. I used Paid Memberships Pro well before they sponsored my podcast. Like all of these tools
mhm.
I've used, and I'm like, hey, I use your tool. It helps me. I think it can help other creators. Anyway, but I will disclose anytime they sponsor. Like that's really
Gotcha.
important to me. So spoiler alert, there's going to be a couple more disclosures. But Paid Memberships Pro, I've like been around the block with a bunch of membership plugins for WordPress.
Mhm.
And Paid Memberships Pro, I think, is just the easiest and the most flexible. And I'm a big fan. And like, I mean, I know the owners, like, they're some of my oldest friends in the WordPress
Oh, pretty
space.
cool.
And they just make such a great product. I'm a really big fan. And because I have like little, like, special things I want to do,
Mhm.
like maybe you could get away with like a Restrict Content Pro, which is another WordPress plugin. But like, I want to do a couple of specific things and Paid Memberships Pro made it very easy for me to do those things. So love Paid
Like what?
Memberships Pro.
Like what specifically?
Well, one is that a lot of membership plugins are subscription centric.
Mhm,
And so, for example, I was looking at Restrict Content Pro
mhm,
and I didn't want a recurring charge, right? But the way the checkout page looked, if you don't have a recurring charge, was very confusing. With
mhm,
Paid Memberships Pro, they make it crystal clear. It is this
mhm,
much today and $0 for the rest of your life. And so I liked that. There's a couple of like custom code snippets that they provided. Oh, like one was automatically downgrading because with the extended playbook, right, you get
mhm,
access to the stuff for a year, like, and the coaching call is just for me. So
mhm,
with Paid Memberships Pro, I was easily able to downgrade them from extended playbook to core playbook after a year.
mm,
Right. And you might be wondering, well, why don't you just charge a subscription for the extended playbook then?
mhm.
I didn't wanna muddy the language, right? I didn't wanna say like, "Oh, it's one price for this, and then it's annual for this." If people want more of my coaching time after that year, then they can pay me directly for the coaching, and they'll still have access to the playbook. And actually, if you become a coaching client of mine, you get your own custom page in the playbook where I
Mm.
surface the plays that are relevant to our discussion. That's another reason I wanted to do it this way. And so, stuff like that, Paid Memberships Pro just made really easy, and I love it.
That I love that you brought that up because I think it's something that many overlook when it comes to picking tech, specifically for like a membership. And like there's two ways to go about it. They can either build on like rented land, or you can use kind of your own tech. And I'm a big fan of WordPress, and in my time, I've used plenty of software. And what's always interesting for me, it's like is the like you mentioned the checkout process, where it's like some membership platforms are so hard to upgrade members or downgrade members, or to sell just courses separate from the membership. Like it's just there's so many different things, but it's really cool. And I have used Paid Memberships Pro before, and I
Nice.
agree, great product as well.
Nice.
So yeah, highly recommend
Yeah,
it.
it's great. And so that's the site. The rest of my business is pretty much run through ConvertKit.
Mhm.
Full disclosure, previous podcast sponsor, current social media sponsor. But I love ConvertKit. I think it's great. I am using them. So something I hadn't mentioned up until this point is I do have a pro version of my podcast
Mhm,
where people can pay $5 a month for that. It's a totally separate offer. I pretty much only sell it on the podcast,
mhm.
and I'm using ConvertKit Commerce for that.
Gotcha.
Not as robust as other membership or subscription platforms. You don't even know when people churn as we record this.
Oh, what?
And I just thought it was a really
Yikes.
simple implementation, but that was disappointing. I've put in a, I suspect it's going to evolve. Maybe that's hope on my part, but the tools, I guess. Like I just thought like everything, you know what? The newsletter is going to be a core component of my membership moving forward,
Yeah.
and my newsletter platform allows me to sell subscriptions. What I
Mhm,
hadn't considered was the other core part of that offering was a private podcast through my podcast host Castos,
mhm.
and I need to know when someone churns so I can revoke access.
Yeah.
Right now, at this point, it's not that big of a deal if
Mhm.
someone churns out and I forget to revoke their access. But as the show grows, right? If I'm leaving like I don't know $1,000 a month on the table, right?
Mhm.
I'll want to recoup that. If I'm leaving like $5 a month on the table, it hasn't become enough of a headache for me to look into. So that I've like provided that feedback to ConvertKit. But anyway, ConvertKit, all of my forms, all of my automations, all of my marketing, not all of my automations, all of my emails go out through ConvertKit, and that's a really core part of my business. And then all of my automations, as of today, the day we record this, are through Make. I
Mhm.
used Zapier, and I was like a Zapier stan. That's the only Gen Z word I'll
Yeah.
use for a long time. And then I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about how great Make is.
Mhm.
And then they mentioned, oh yeah, and I'm only paying like $10 a month for 10,000 tasks or whatever. And
Oh,
I
I'm
thought,
taking a look at that after this,
what?
100%.
Yeah, because I went to Zapier. One of the other things I started to do at the end of last year was move all of my annual build subscriptions to
Mhm,
monthly.
mhm.
And with Zapier, they charge 33% more. And so I was paying $50 a year, $50 a month for Zapier on the annual plan. And that jumped to $73 a month
Whoa.
on the monthly plan. And I thought
Whoa.
a 90% difference in monthly cost is absolutely worth me spending some time in January to see if I can switch.
100%,
And
yeah.
it took me about 2 weeks to learn, make, and move stuff over, but I was able to move stuff over. I was able to move some things natively. So, like, I was using a Zap to watch a Dropbox folder to upload videos in that folder to Vimeo.
Mhm.
Vimeo does that natively. I
Yeah.
didn't know that because I always had the automation. And so I'm like, yeah, it's better if Vimeo does this, obviously. Or like, I have like a whole outreach, like a guest outreach automation where I would put things in a Google Sheet. I
Mhm,
would fill it all out and it would put together a pitch, a personalized pitch, like
mhm.
Mad Lib style though.
Nice.
And when I set a field to ready to send as is yes or one, Zapier would watch that Google Sheet and send out the email. Well, I
Mhm.
moved that into Airtable because that's where the rest of my operations are. And I don't need an automation anymore because in Airtable, it supports that.
That
When you set a field to a certain thing, it could kick off its own automation to send an email. And so,
this is such a good, sorry to cut you off, but this is such a good point to, like, look at the current tech you have and see what automations they currently offer because they constantly update and change, you
yes,
know?
yes. And here is you want as few links in the chain as possible. Let me tell
Mhm.
you a horror story. It was October, November 2021. And I was gearing up for my first big, properly done Black Friday sale, which did pretty well. But I realized at the beginning of November that nobody had joined my mailing list in like a month. And I'm like, I mean, I wasn't getting a lot of subscriptions at that time anyway, but like
Mhm.
nobody in a month is weird.
Mhm.
And so I decided to like see what was going on. I hated the way that ConvertKit's forms were being displayed in WordPress.
Mhm.
And so I decided I'll make the forms in Gravity Forms. They'll look super pretty.
Mhm.
And then I'll just use a Zapier Zap to send that form information to ConvertKit. And yeah, I totally did that, except I forgot to turn on the Zap.
Oh, no.
And so not only did I miss out on those subscribers, but I turned off the automatically log forms. So like
So you
just
all that data.
lost subscribers into the ether. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'll use the native ConvertKit forms. And in the time from when I tried it to that point,
Mhm.
it got a lot better. And you could actually
Yeah.
style the forms a little bit better as well. But
Mhm.
they did a better job of loading faster because that was the other thing. They used to take a long time to load. They did a
Yeah.
better job of loading faster and adopting the styles of the website. So definitely evaluate your tech stack, test, and have as few links in the chain as possible because if one, this is like 70s style Christmas lights where if
Mhm.
one goes out, they all go out.
Boom.
It's not like today's where like if one goes out, the rest are still basically on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Got it. So I love your tech stack. It seems to really work with the current flow and structure that you have within your business and the fact that you're using all the automations. Now, the other key component you mentioned earlier was that you had a VA. So tell me a little bit about your team. Is it just you and the VA? Do you have more people behind the scenes helping you grow? What does that look like?
Yeah, I have a team of 3 or 4 contractors. My VA is a VA in the Philippines. I try to pay her well above what they make on average there, because she isn't into she does a lot of the stuff that I don't really wanna do, and so, like, she handles, like, uploading to my YouTube channel and things like that. I mean, at this point, I can't even all of her tasks are in Airtable, and I just know that things are happening and it's well worth what I pay. I actually if I don't have enough new work for her, I still pay her a minimum
Mhm.
because like I don't want her to leave me. So like I gave her a raise last year and I said, "You know what? Even if you I will pay you for like a minimum of 8 hours a week or whatever."
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
like even if you only worked 6, I'm going to pay you the 8 because I want you to
Yeah.
stay. And so like yeah, she does a ton of stuff for me. I have a podcast editor because editing podcasts is my least favorite part of the job and I'm bad at it and he's very good at it. There are a lot of automations in that workflow where like once I'm done recording, I'm basically done. And so like my editor will automatically get an email to edit.
Yeah.
I have a transcriber, she'll automatically get an email to transcribe. Then my VA will automatically get an email to upload new episodes. All like Airtable and Make are like the linchpin of that. And then I have an accountant. I don't know if that counts. She's a contractor. I pay her
Oh,
monthly
that's important, man.
to do
That's
my
especially
P&L.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she proved her weight in gold our first year because like she like restructured how I filed and I got like $8,000 back in taxes. And I'm like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
I'm stuck with you forever now.
Forever. Yeah. 100%.
Um, and then I have a video editor sometimes. He was an integral part of my team last year, but
Mhm.
as I reevaluated how I was going to do YouTube videos,
Mhm.
I decided to focus more on quality over quantity. And so I have that ability. I don't mind editing YouTube videos, or I don't mind editing videos, and I'm going to
Mhm.
do a lot fewer this year on my podcast Liftoff channel. And then on my main channel, which is just like Joe Casabona, those are gonna be like more like one-off quick videos. And so like I'm really just focused on getting information out there on that channel,
Yeah.
not doing like the big please the algorithm type videos that I'm gonna do over on Podcast Liftoff. And
So
I
then, so going
yeah.
going forward, YouTube will be kind of part of your traffic generation
Yeah, and it
process.
was for a while, but I wasn't doing it right.
Mhm.
So like I've had a YouTube channel for like 10 years and it was mostly a place for me to upload webinars or do like quick like WordPress tutorial videos. But
Mhm.
in May, when I was like, I'm not gonna do WordPress anymore,
Yeah.
I was like, what's this channel gonna be for? And I've decided it's gonna be like a build in public.
Mm.
And so I still use WordPress and I still think WordPress is the best platform for creators, right? I mean, you're probably not gonna have a Gumroad situation with
Yeah.
WordPress, right? And so over there, I've like kind of extracted myself from the WordPress community and that I'm not so entrenched in the everyday goings ons of the development. And
Gotcha.
so I still use WordPress, and that's what my tutorials are gonna be about moving forward, or my videos are gonna be over
Mhm.
there. And then, yeah, on the podcast Liftoff channel, that's going to be a place for me to generate new organic traffic by putting out somewhat infrequent but high quality videos.
Mm. I like that. I like that. Especially, yeah, I still think YouTube has huge potential. And I think it's more so like you were talking about the quality as opposed to the quantity when it comes to those types of things. Now, I like the fact that your team is pretty lean. Like you have your VA, which I think is like the number one hire anyone needs to do right out of the
Yeah.
gate.
Yes.
You know, did
100%.
you find them? Did you find your VA through, for example, Upwork, or did you go through a separate site?
I found a site there was a site called onlinejobs.ph, which is
Okay, yeah.
basically specifically to find a VA in the Philippines.
Mhm.
And I thought, like, I'll just do this short term, like, while my business makes money, or while
Yeah.
my business is not making a lot of money, but I still recognize I need a VA,
Mhm.
and I'll treat them as well as I possibly can financially. And then I'll, like, move to somebody in the States, like, when I can afford it. But, like, I really like my VA, so I've just been kinda, like, increasing her pay over
Nice.
time. And so, like, I'll do it again this year because I really value the work that she and I probably if I am to like, if I hit my certain profit goals, not revenue
Mhm.
goals, profit goals.
Big difference.
Yeah, right. If I hit certain profit goals, I probably will hire another VA here in the States to do more of, like, email management, strategy stuff, right? Because my VA in the Philippines is really good at doing the specific repeatable tasks, uploading my podcast, creating these LinkedIn carousels, but I'm not going to sit down and like strategize with her or like
Mhm.
build out a new Airtable base for like sponsorship management, right?
Mhm.
That's something that I would want to do with, somebody who has a different skill set.
Gotcha. All right, Joe. Well, I think I have a super clear understanding of your entire process now, from the offer to the funnel to the traffic to the team to the tech. And I gotta say, man, I'm super impressed. Yeah, I'm definitely blown away by the way you changed the whole course structure. I think that to me is like the biggest takeaway from this. And then the fact that you have a team that can help you run it and you use a bunch of automations to help you free up your time, I think is one of the other biggest takeaways. So seriously, I just want to say thank you for being on. Thank you for showing us. And I want to give you the opportunity right now. Just tell the audience, where can they come and find you? Where can they know more about you? Where can they come and sign up, for your program?
Thanks so much, Oscar. This has been so great. I think I just realized that OMG are probably your initials. If people want to learn more about me, you can go to podcastliftoff.com/OMG.
Hmm.
There you'll find links to my podcast and obviously the playbook. You'll also there will be an email opt-in for my Airtable podcast planners. And that has like the automations built in. There's a YouTube planner in there too. But so you'll get that free for signing up. And then if you use the code OMG at checkout over at playbook.podcastliftoff.com, you'll get $50 off the playbook at any level.
Hey, look at that. Hey, thank you, Joe. Thank you, sir. I
No
much
problem.
appreciate that. I might sign up for that Airtable just so I can take a peek.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it's fun, something I didn't mention, but part of the playbook is also my automations library. So like again,
Yeah.
I'm big on building in public and showing people what I'm doing, and so members of the playbook will get access to like all my I guess I'll have to change the links to to make links, but all of the automations I use to run my podcast are available there as well.
Got it. Wow. All right, Joe. One last question before we depart. If you were to do it all over again, what's the one thing that you would do differently?
I would absolutely do a webinar to pre-sell a course first. Going into a hole for 4 to 6 months and building a course and then nobody buying it is just like demoralizing for so many reasons. And so absolutely I would test new topics, especially today. Like the webinar I'm doing in a couple of weeks comes from a particularly popular LinkedIn post
Okay.
that got a lot of traction, and I thought, okay, I can probably do a webinar on this. And then like the next live cohort in the playbook will be all about that as well, as long as people buy at the end
Yeah.
of the webinar. So testing ideas is something I would definitely do more.
Awesome. All right, Joe. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having on. Wish you the best of luck and keep us updated with any new enhancements you got, because I feel like you got something brewing that's going to pop off, and I'm excited to see your journey, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Oscar. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.